Hello and a warm welcome to the M365 Con. Today here with me is Francis Folaranmi. A warm welcome to you. The topic of today is from capacity chaos to cost control, understanding FinOps in Microsoft Fabric. I will hand it over to you, but you're on mute, I think, Francis. You must unmute. You must click on the microphone on the left side.
Oh, yes, I can hear you. Hello, everybody. Yeah, all right. Good morning, everyone. So let's get started on today's session. So, okay. So today we're talking about from capacity chaos to cost control, and we need to understand what FinOps is. So, what comes to your mind the first time you hear about FinOps? Some people say financial operations, some will say finance and DevOps, some will say saving money and all what's not. But for some of these things, they are correct, some they are not correct. So let's find out what FinOps actually is. Now, there are common pitfalls. You see, it's organization deploying Microsoft Fabric, and then they are excited about their deployments, having unified analytics in one place until they receive their invoice and they realize that, oh, that's actually a big one, and that's resulting about 40 to 60% wasted on cloud cost, and then you have capacity running for 24 hours in a week, which is not necessarily the case. Now, what is FinOps? FinOps is an operational framework and cultural practice which maximizes the business value of cloud and technology. Now, you can see that some of this definition was actually highlighted. So it's not just about financial operation. It's not just about cost control. It's not just about what the bill you have in your environment, but it's actually a culture that you need to imbibe in your organization. It has to be about framework that you are putting in place to ensure that your investment in cloud and technology is fully maximized. And also, you need to enable a timely data-driven decision making and create financial accountability through collaboration between the engineering team, between the finance team, and also the business as well. So this is the official definition as defined by the FinOps Foundation. So you need to use the framework that has been provided to actually maximize the business value of your cloud and technology. Now, this is the um, FinOps Foundation framework. Now, it sits between business strategy and also technology strategy. How do we ensure that our technology strategy and business strategy align? That's where FinOps sits. Now, there are different scopes for you to actually implement FinOps, either in your public cloud, your Azure, your AWS, your GCP, and every other public cloud you have available, or even your data centers, or even your licensing, your Office 365 license, your AI solution, and custom. And lastly, your SaaS application, that's your software as a service. And that is where Microsoft Fabric come in, right? So you need to implement FinOps in all of these scopes. And remember, as part of the definition, one very key thing there is collaboration. Who are the people that are going to be collaborating to implement FinOps? You have your engineering team, you have your leadership team, the procurement team, the finance, and the products. You might be wondering that what is someone in procurement, someone in finance doing with this technology collaboration, but we are going to find out as we go over this framework. And also, there are some allied personas that are not part of the core personas. They are your IT financial management, IT asset management, people in security, and even sustainability are all of the personnel that need to come together and help you actually implement your FinOps. There are basic principles of FinOps. First off, at the very beginning, is that teams need to collaborate to implement FinOps, and also the business value of technological decision needs to happen as a major principle of FinOps. And of course, everybody needs to take ownership. Every personnel that is coming together to implement FinOps, they need to take ownership of their bits of what FinOps is. Either somebody coming from your finance team or somebody from your engineering team, who are your core developers. Everybody needs to take ownership. Another core principle is that the FinOps data needs to be accessible, and it also needs to be timely, and also needs to be accurate, because we are talking about finance now. I know that finance people don't joke with their numbers. So the FinOps data needs to be accurate, accessible, and also come in a timely manner. You don't want to have a chargeback after the bill has been sorted. And then it has to be enabled centrally in your organization, not, oh, engineering team just doing their thing separately, or finance team doing their thing separately, or even the procurement doing their thing separately. It has to be enabled centrally so that everybody is working hand in hand. And then we have to take advantage of the variable cost model. So these are the 6 basic principles of FinOps. And we already talked about the scope in which Microsoft Fabric fall into the SaaS scope of FinOps. Now, we also have domains as a major part of this framework. Domains are the outcome that your FinOps practice is going to achieve, and the capabilities that you have in-house is what will help you achieve this domain. So we have the understanding the usage and cost domain. We have the quantifying the business value as another domain. We have the optimize and usage cost as another domain. And lastly, we have the manage the FinOps practice domain. Now, under each of these domains, we have the capabilities that you need to enable within your organization to actually implement FinOps. Now, one of them under the usage and understanding cost is data ingestion. You need to understand your usage data. You need to understand your cost data. So you need to ingest it in a place where you can make use of it. You need to then allocate it. When you talk about allocation, okay, who is using what, in which business departments are they using this cost? So you need to have all of these things. And also, it is after you actually ingested the data for your FinOps and also allocate it, then you now start looking at reporting, analytics, and even anomaly management is another capability of understanding your usage and cost. And also, we have the quantifying the business value. How do you quantify the business value from your investment? Okay, you have invested in Microsoft Fabric. How do you ensure that you're actually delivering value? You don't want to invest 1,000 and then the return on your investment is not significant. So you need to be able to understand and quantify this business value, which is another major domain of FinOps. And some of the capabilities that you have is your planning and estimating, where you start talking about what size of fabric capacity do you want to deploy. You want to talk about forecasting your usage. You want to talk about budgeting, because now you may have a lower fabric capacity. Let's say you start from a F16 capacity, and then over the course of a month, particular months, you realize that your usage is higher. You want to be able to do adequate budgeting by having some Azure credit that you can use to deploy a higher capacity of Microsoft Fabric. Then you benchmark. You also want to do your unit economics. Then another main domain of FinOps is actually optimizing usage and cost, your cloud sustainability, your licensing and SaaS, which is what we talk about with Microsoft Fabric capacity licensing, then your rate optimization and also workload. Some of these capabilities and domain are applicable to Microsoft Fabric, but when you look at your entire cloud infrastructure, they may fit more. But for Microsoft Fabric, some of them are actually enabled. And lastly, we have the manage the FinOps practice as another major domain of FinOps. And it means we have your FinOps practice operation, you have your policy and governance, you have your FinOps assessment, and education. Like what we are having now can count as education in your organization. Like, okay, what exactly is FinOps? What is this framework? How do we implement it? Then invoicing and chargebacks are another capability that you have within FinOps framework. Then you have your FinOps tool and services, where we are going to elaborate in detail today the FinOps tool that you can use for Microsoft Fabric, and then the intersecting disciplines. Okay, how do you collaborate with people in finance, in procurement, and in people in products, or even the allied practitioners? So these are the overall domains and capabilities that you have with FinOps. And of course, FinOps is not something that you finish at a go. It's an iterative process. So you have the inform phase of FinOps implementation, you have the optimize phase, and also you have the operating phase. Now, when you start to implement some of the domains and capability, you get informed. So, for example, when you look at the usage, understanding usage and cost domain, you see that we can put in the informing phase to be report and analytics. So your reporting analytics can sit very well within the inform. So when you know what is happening with your cost, when you are what is happening with your usage, then that is an informed stage. Now, all of these capabilities and domain can be distributed in any of these 3 phases, which is the inform, optimize, and operate. So okay, when you know that okay, you are not right sizing, that's an information that you can process, then you need to to actually optimize, and actually maybe you scale down or scale up. And then once you do that, then you now begin to operate based on that optimization and operation that you carried out. Now let's go into the next slide. Also, as part of FinOps framework, we have the maturity model, we have the cross stage, you have the work stage, you have the run stage. At the end of this session, I hope that you'll be able to actually estimate the maturity stage that you are in your organization. Either you are on the crawling stage, or you are in the working phase, or even the run phase. And some of the things that will serve as pointer or indicator of which maturity model phase you are on right now. For example, on the cross stage, you want to check if you have any reporting or tooling at all. If you don't have anything at all in your organization, that means you are at the crawling stage. Is there any measurement that is being provided? Are there KPIs that you are measuring? So these are some of the things that allow you to estimate the maturity model that you are in your organization. And also, across all the domains and capabilities, you then start to grow from crawling to working. Under crawling, you want to understand that are there automation in place that you put into your workflow, into your process. For example, in Microsoft Fabric, maybe when your capacity is not working at optimal, you want to scale down. Is there automation in place that you can use to do that? So if you have automations, then you can say that, oh, you are towards the working phase of your maturity model. Or are there minimum and medium KPIs in your organization? And of course, the run phase is the highest maturity model that you have with FinOps, the capability you understand everything around FinOps for your environment. Either you are even doing Azure, you are doing AWS, you are doing GCP. But our focus today is just Microsoft Fabric, which is just a SaaS application as part of the scope of FinOps. Now, Fabric licensing, as we know, is measured in capacity units, and then you start from the least capacity, from your F2 capacity to your F64 up until F2048 or thereabouts. But these are the sizing and the units in which Fabric capacity is measured today. Now, typically, you see people using F2 capacity for their development and testing. Some can even use it for production if it's a very small organization, depending on the size of the organization. This is not a ground rule, but the capacity sizing varies from organization to organization, depending on the size of the organization. So these are the units in which Fabric capacity is measured. Now, how do you calculate Fabric CU cost? Now, for example, if you go to the official documentation, you are going to see the varying costs that vary from region to region. Now, I'm using the West Europe region for the calculation in this space. Now, for your F2 capacity in a monthly basis, you have about $321 for your pay-as-you-go subscription. But if you use a reservation, then you end up with the $191, which is about 41% approximately in saving costs if you do reservation. Now, when you make a purchase of any of these Fabric capacity units, you are reserving maximum number of seconds. Take, for example, if you are making a capacity cost for a F2 capacity, the hourly cost of an F2 capacity is a $0.22 because it's an F2 and that's two capacity units. So you multiply that by 2, then you have a $0.44 per hour. So you have 730 hours in a month. You multiply that by 730 hours, you have 321 hours. So that's how you arrive at your monthly cost of capacity. However, some of the FinOps tools that we are going to see, especially the Microsoft Fabric capacity app, which is a reporting tool in Fabric as of today, is actually measured in capacity units. Now, when you make a reservation, right, for example, now you have 2,328 seconds thousand in a month. But because you are on F2, when you multiply that by 2, you have roughly about 5 million seconds in capacity units. Now, if you consume about 15,772 capacity unit seconds, and that is the unit that you are going to see on your Fabric capacity metric app, what you have on your official documentation is the capacity units, the CU, and then when you have on your app is capacity seconds. So you have a 15,000 capacity seconds from your app, then you multiply that by the cost of using your F2 capacity in 1 second. So the cost of using a capacity in 1 second for a F2 capacity is about $0.0061, and the total seconds that is available to you for an F2 capacity is about 5 million point $256,000. However, if you have a higher capacity, a F4, F8, F16, then you have more available for you to use. So whatever you use out of the 5 million is what is your utilization of that capacity. So now let's go into the next slide. What are the things that even consume some of the capacity units? Your engineering workload, ranging from your Spark job, your data pipeline, your notebook, your data science workload, your model training, experiments, your Power BI refreshing, your reports rendering, even your warehouse to your queries, your table creation, and even your real-time analysis also, and even one day. So these are the various fabric workload that actually lead to the consumption of your capacity unit. Now, some of the things that we need to understand with the CU economics is the smoothing buffer, which allows you to your capacity to keep working even when you are consuming above the capacity that you actually purchased. And you have throttling when the consumption exceeds the capacity beyond the smoothing window. Now, let's say you are supposed to use 1,000 units of capacity, and then your consumption is slightly above 1,000, then there is that window that your capacity will still continue to work, and that is the smoothing buffer. Once you go outside that, let's say it's about 1,100, let's say you're now going towards 1,200 capacity, and that's your throttling area. And then you have also background operations that even if you are not actively working in your environment, these operations are running in your environment. And all of these things actually uh, contribute to the consumption of your capacity. And then the time frame from the smoothing buffer is about 10 minutes. So let's say your consumption is about 1,000, and then you are already above that limit. So for about 10 minutes, you are still able to use 100 units more, making it 1,001 units for your smoothing buffer. Then anything after that, then you have throttling, and then you have things to slow down, and then you have queue in your environment until the capacity shuts down completely. Now, you want to monitor all these costs in your fabric environment. You want to monitor it by workspace. You want to monitor the operations that are actually consuming your capacity. Is it the background operation? Is it the interactive operation? Interactive operations are operations when you are actively working in your fabric environments, when you are running pipeline, when you are running your Spark job, when you are actually querying your database, your lake houses, and all of that. So these are some of the metrics that you are going to see in Microsoft Fabric Capacity Metric app. Now, common pitfall is that you may have capacity running for 24 hours, which is not necessarily uh, always important to have it running. If you have a situation where your capacity is just supposed to run for about 8 hours in a day, and then the rest of the hours you don't need to have your capacity running, then you want to ensure that you turn it off. Another thing that you can have is over provisioning. Maybe you just need a F64 capacity, and you've gone ahead to provision F128. One another major pitfall here is that an organization that is trying to go into Microsoft Fabric, they probably just need uh, a F4 or F8 to get started, and then they go ahead and start with F64, which is a lot more expensive as compared to a lower capacity tier of licensing. So you don't want to start from the highest capacity, you want to start from the a lower capacity. And the thing about capacity in Microsoft Fabric is that you can always scale up or scale down even within the month. So if we are starting out from an F4, and then you realize that your consumption is way above F4, you can scale up to the next year to F16 or even F32, depending on the metric that you are getting. Also, some of the things that you can have is when you have a poorly optimized SQL query and even your custom query as well. So these are the things that can actually serve as pitfall, and then we can have unnecessary data movements. Now, there are a lot of things that Microsoft has invested in one link within Microsoft Fabric that actually do not require you moving data from one page to another, because your data in one link is available to everybody in your organization. So you have your shortcuts, you have your mirroring, you have your all manner of things that you can use in your environment that prevents you to actually just moving data unnecessarily from one point to another. Because when you start moving data from one place to another, you are at the risk of duplicating that data. And when you have your data duplicated in your environment, that means you are consuming double size of the space you're supposed to consume in your one lake. And of course, the running cost of the compute to actually move that data will also be incurred when you are moving data unnecessarily in your environment. Now we have optimization as well when you are doing right sizing. So think about when you are running an F8 capacity, and that capacity is picking at 45 capacity units. So that means you are underutilizing that capacity at about 65%. So you can just scale down from your F128 to F64, and that will still peak at 45, and that will result in about 50% in your cost reduction by just doing the right sizing of your capacity. Now, some of the things that you can do is that you can pause your capacity during non-business hours. For example, you can have your capacity running from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m., which is about 11 hours a day, and then it is paused between 7 p.m. to 8 a.m., depending on your organization or when the peak hour is. Or you can even pause it completely during the weekend, or even when you are not in your active hours. Maybe you are using a F16 capacity, but because you are not in your active hour, you may want to scale it down to maybe F8 capacity, and that will be at a lower cost. And in the morning, when you are at active capacity, then you scale up again. So you can see that, okay, some of these things can actually be automated so that somebody is not just going back in there to scale up and scale down. So you can actually have it scheduled, and you can have a potential cost reduction of up to 54% when you actually implement some of this scheduling and pausing and resuming your capacity. However, you need to be very careful on how you want to pause your capacity. The timing is very important, and also the size. So before you can start to implement some of these things, you need to understand the capacity metric of which we are going to get into. So that will inform you which is what on which approach to take, on what capacity size you need to use, and the timing that you need to actually follow in optimizing your capacity. And also, I talked about query optimization. You want to ensure that you are using Delta table with the ordering. You want to implement partition, proper indexing. We have a very large database. Then you want to avoid the wildcard aesthetic when you are querying all the columns in your table. When in reality, you just need 5, 6 columns of your table. So this can reduce your consumption as well by 10 times. Now, cost allocation. You want to track cost, which workspace is consuming the most, how do you allocate to various workspace, which business units, depending on how you set up your organization. Maybe the workspaces you have in your organization is by business units, or if not, you want to track by workspace, and you want to create a chargeback model and also enable budgeting and accountability with your cost allocation and also your chargeback. Now you need to build a FinOps culture, which you can actually follow the framework that we talked about earlier. You bring about people from the engineering, the core developers, your fabric developers, your data engineers. Then you bring them together with the finance people that handle your invoice, your monthly invoice from your Azure billing data, and also the business value. Maybe the organization has been promised to actually have a return on investment of about say 10, 20, 15%. Then you want to make sure that everybody is in the loop, from your procurement and all the core personnel that we discussed earlier in the framework. Now, some of the important metrics that you need to do when you are implementing FinOps for Microsoft Fabric is your CU utilization rate. How well are you utilizing your capacity units? So for someone that is on F2 capacity that has about 5 million capacity units per second, how well are you utilizing it? Are you consuming just a million out of the 2.5 million capacity unit that you have available to you? So if you are utilizing about 1 million out of about 2.5 million, that's barely 50%, or you are consuming more than that, or you are even consuming just 500,000 units out of about 2.5 million units, then in that case, you want to scale down. Then the cost per workspace, which workspace is actually consuming the most capacity unit? Is it your dev? Is it your test, or even your production workspace? Typically, you expect your production workspace to actually consume more capacity units. When you have a dev workspace and your test workspace consuming the same capacity unit as your production workspace, then you know that's a very poor thing to have. You don't want to have your test and production environments running at almost the same capacity. Or some another metric you want to actually look at is your idle capacity time. Okay, do you have a situation whereby nothing is done in your environment in the non-active hour, or you are not only at optimal, then you want to scale down so that the 13 hour window when you are not actively working, then you are using a lower capacity, and then your billing data at the end of the month is reasonable, and then the cost value by business. So you track all of these things monthly, and you can also set up alerts for some of them. Now, if you are consuming implementing FinOps for your fabric environment, here are some quick wins that can lead to up to 30 to 40% of cost reduction in your first month of implementing it. First off, you can just enable your Fabric capacity metric app in your Fabric environment. This gives you idea into your consumption. One of the major KPI you are going to find on that app is the utilization, which is the average utilization of your capacity. Then you want to force your dev and your test capacities. If you have a very large organization where your capacity are separated based on the environment, then you want to pause the dev and test. But if you don't, maybe you want to actually turn off some things in your workspaces that have been dedicated to be the lower environment. Then you need to right size your production capacity as well based on the peak usage that we are going to see later on in this presentation from our Fabric capacity metric app. And then you want to implement some Azure budgets, and also you can do audit and optimize the top high capacity consuming queries. Maybe you have a query that you are running regularly in your environment and they seem to be the most expensive, then you can optimize them as well. So these are some of the things that you can do as a quick win checklist if you are trying to implement FinOps in your Microsoft Fabric environment. Yeah, what are the tools that are available today to implement FinOps for Microsoft Fabric? You have your Fabric capacity metric app that I talked about. We have your chargeback reporting. These two are very similar, and part of the plan by Microsoft is actually to consolidate the two reports into one. So I'm going to show us what each of these reports look like and some of the KPIs that you can track. Then you have an open source tool that have been developed by the Fabric CAT team. So you have the Fabric capacity cost analysis toolkit is on GitHub, and then some automations that you can do instead of having to go into your Azure environment, pause and resume your capacity, or scale up and scale down. So these are some native tools that you can use to implement cost and actually ensure the business value of your Fabric environment is well utilized. Now, I talked about automation. One automation that you can quickly do is with your Azure Logic app, where you can actually schedule a trigger. So for somebody that have their active hour between 9 a.m. to about 7 p.m., then you want to set up a trigger that will just go off after your active hour. And then you can just call some of the Fabric management API as well. You can suspend and resume your capacity. Now, before questions, let me just quickly take us through some of the tools that are available. So this is, first off, let's go through the capacity metric app. Now, this is the capacity metric app. It's actually a Power BI reporting that shows you what is going on in your environment. So you have the capacity name. So if you have multiple capacity in your environment, you have a drop down right here that you can use to pick your capacity and see what is going on. So if you have a F2 capacity, you see the size of your capacity right here, F2, F4, F16, up to F2048, and then the average utilization, which is the very important metric for your FinOps implementation. Now, for this capacity now, I'm at 2.3% average utilization, and then the peak utilization is 4.84%, which already informed me that I might be over provisioning. So if my capacity is a F4 capacity, and then the peak utilization is about 4%, and then the average utilization is about 2.3%, then I want to scale down, because irrespective of what you are consuming, when you have purchased an F64 capacity, you are still going to pay for it. So this is the over provisioning. If you have an utilization of about 2.3%, so you want to scale down to the lowest tier possible that can actually allow for your workload. Now you can see the consumption of the capacity in this ribbon chart. So for example, now Saturday 17th, the metric is about 117,000. So if you multiply that by the cost per second of your capacity that you provision, then you get the cost for that particular day. And also you can see the last 14 days based on the various workspace. For example, I can see that this workspace is the most expensive workspace in my environment. So this is very believable. So if I multiply this by the per second rate of my capacity, the per second rate of the capacity is different from one capacity to another. So for example, if I have a F2 capacity, it is cheaper. If I have F4 capacity, it is more expensive. So the per second rate multiplied by this number by about 1.8 million will give us the cost that this workspace is actually consuming. And of course, you can zoom into this chart and see hourly rates of what you are consuming in your environment. So I'll just wait for a few seconds for this report to load up. So this is actually a column chart that shows us the background operation and also the interactive operation. So for Saturday 17th, at this particular time, let me just zoom in gently so that we can appreciate this. Let me just go on focus mode. Yes, so we can then see the charts better this way. So you have this bar chart that shows you your capacity consumption at this hour. So it is about 30 seconds window per chart. So at this particular hour, you have a total consumption of about 80 capacity unit seconds, and then you have a background operation consuming about 2.5 seconds out of it. And of course, at this point, you can see that you have some throttling, you have your interactive operation as well. At this point, somebody is actually actively working in your fabric environment. So this is the maximum capacity consumption line. So once you have a very reasonable gap between this trend, this dotted line, and your consumption, then you are probably over provision. Now, this is a trial capacity, which is by default an F64 capacity. So if a F64 capacity, I'm having a consumption of about 2%, then you know that is over provision. So you want to actually scale down. So it simply means that you are deploying more than you actually need in your environment. Now, we also have the chargeback, which is more relatable and it's easier to navigate. So you have a date range that you can use to select the time frame of what you want to see in your environment. So you are able to see the number of capacities you have. If you have multiple capacities, 3, 4, 5 capacities, you get to see them here. The number of workspaces that you have across all your capacities and the items. If you have a very good governance in place, then you can see them also by domain and also by subdomain. So for example, I can just pick the top 5, or I can just change the number manually. I can pick top 10, then the capacity. So I'm picking just this trial capacity right now. And then maybe I want to see for a particular workspace or a particular item, then I select that as well. Then I click on apply filter. Then this way, I'm able to see the consumption for all of these items. Like I said earlier, both the chargeback reporting that is available in your App Store in Microsoft Fabric and the Fabric Capacity Metric app, there are plans to actually consolidate the two of them into a singular view so that you now have a robust tool to actually monitor your capacity consumption in Microsoft Fabric. So you're able to actually break down your capacity consumption based on the workspace, based on the item, and then the utilization, what is consuming your capacity, you then get to see all of them. Now, my favorite tool out of these tools that are available as of today is this open source tool, which is available on GitHub. So let me just zoom out of this and scroll a bit up. So it's a solution accelerator that has been developed by some CAT members. So these are the people that develop it. We have Cedric, you have Manuel, Anthony, and Roman Castres. So you can actually go up and check out this that open source tool that is being improved. So it gives you an high level overview of your fabric cost analysis as well. So it helps you monitor your fabric cost. Now, this is what you are going to have as your architecture. You are exporting your Azure cost data, which is the focus data. Focus data is the FinOps cost and usage data. That's the full meaning of focus data. Then your billing data, and also if you have your reservation, all of these data, you are going to be ingesting them into your lake house, and then from that lake house, you then get to create semantic model where you can now create your reporting on top of it. And of course, you can go even a step higher by creating a data agent that you can use natural language query to actually get what is going on. Now, the full documentation and app setup, this is available also in this GitHub. So it's a very easy setup that you can just go ahead and implement. So on this FCA solution toolkit that is available, we have a number of pages. You have the home page, which is the summary of the key financial metrics that you see. So let me just zoom in briefly so you can see that you can see your total cost. So for example, your total cost here is showing about 32. Let's say you have deployed an F2 capacity, and which is about $321, or yeah, $321 for West Europe. Now this one is in euro actually. So but about $321 is the estimate. But if your total cost is about 32, that's barely 10% of your cost. So you want to actually scale down, and you can see the breakdown of your total cost from reservation to your pay as you go. And if there's any other additional cost, and even your storage. So let's say you have mirroring that you've been set up in your environment, you can also see the cost of that. And then you can see the breakdown as well, the pay as you go cost they take. This is your capacity unit, this is your Power BI, or data movements, or your data flow, even your real-time intelligence. So you can see the breakdown per item in your fabric. Another page that you have right here is your inform. So you can see that this is done with the iterative process of FinOps phases. We have the inform, we have another page which is also helping you to also the inform. Then you have this next page that talks about what you can do to optimize, then optimize again. And lastly, you have a page where you can do your upgrade. So we have multiple pages on this toolkit. And also if you have throttling, then you are able to see uh, that also as well in here. So you see your additional cost, maybe your copilot that you implemented in your Microsoft Fabric as well. You are able to see them in this page. And of course, there are filters that you can use. So let's say you have multiple subscription, a single subscription, and then you have your capacity deployed in these different subscription. Then you want to filter down to a particular subscription and go straight into the capacity that you are trying to monitor the cost for. However, you need to know that if you don't have access to all the subscription when you are trying to implement this open source solution, then you are not going to be able to ingest that data. The data you are going to be able to ingest when you try to implement this open source solution is deployment is dependent on the access that you have. So if you have access to maybe two subscription and you have one and subscription, then you are just going to be able to ingest data for those two subscription as well. So all the prerequisites that you need, everything that you need to actually set up these two is right here. And also you have the this optimized page. This page is designed to enhance efficiency, how the capacity is being utilized. So now let's say for somebody that has provisioned, so for someone that has provisioned a capacity at the about cost of $986, and then their capacity usage is about 60, is about $6.7. So when you subtract that from 986, then you have 979. Irrespective of whether you consume your capacity or not, you are going to be paying about $900 in your bill or in your invoice at the end of the month, which is not good. So why are you giving about $979 away when you are not even using up to $10? So when you have this type of your analytics, then you are able to actually operate and actually scale down, because we have our F2 capacity and then the utilization is about 2%. So that means your use capacity is going to be about 10% in cost compared to the $986. So you can save about $979 in this case. And of course, you can see the things that are actually consuming your capacity as well. And also we have another page here, which is also an optimized page, which helps you to reduce cloud waste. So you're able to see based on reservation, are you able to optimize based on reservation, or you are doing pay as you go? So you are going to see your reservation instance consumption, the percentage used out of your reservation. So in this case now, we have 100% use in your reservation instance. So this is very good. But when you have a reservation and then you are barely using just 50-30% of your reservation, then that is a very terrible place to be, because you pay in advance for reservation and then the entire purpose of reserving that capacity is defeated, because what you are reserving is way more than what you are consuming. So this page gives you that insight, and then you are able to actually go ahead and implement something with your reservation usage as well. Then this page over a detailed view of your cost distribution in your environment, and if you have multiple regions as well. So this is the open source tool that you have. And then lastly, you have this automation that you can do in your environment. So quickly, let me show us that. So this is a sample automation that I've implemented. Now you can use your Azure Logic app to actually shut down your capacity, to pause and resume your capacity. So for example, you can just set your recurrence to happen at a particular time frame. Let's say at a particular time of the day, that it should just switch your capacity based on the logic that you define here, either it is true or false. So maybe for your condition, you can say when your capacity, when the time is between 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., then it should use an F4 capacity. But during your active work hour, then it should use an F8 capacity. Or if you want to actually just force your entire capacity over the weekend. So the number of logic that you have to implement your capacity is very dependent on how you configure your logic app. But typically, this is what your logic app is going to look like. In my own automation right here, what I'm doing is even more interesting, because I'm trying to feed from the capacity utilization on my app right here. So I'm connecting to this average utilization. So this logic app is able to retrieve the capacity average utilization, and I configure it such that once the utilization is greater than 75, then to scale up. I want to scale up to a higher capacity. My capacity right now is running at about F8. So once I have an utilization that is more than 75, then I want to scale up. But if that is not the case, once I have a capacity that once the condition is now false, then I have another condition. So this condition now is saying that once it's less than 5%, then I want to scale down. Now, this is what the scaling down operation is going to do. It's going to check for a resource, create and update resource action as part of our part of our logical action. And then once that is happening, then it's going to also scale down into F2 capacity. So you can actually play around with this sort of automation, either to pause and resume your capacity at a defined time interval, or you want to scale up and scale down based on the actual consumption that is happening in your capacity metric app. So for example, now by the time my average utilization is about 70%, then my logic app that is running is able to detect that, and then automatically it switch up into a higher capacity, maybe from an F8 capacity to an F16 capacity. And that way, you don't have to deal with throttling, you don't have to do with smoothing, and then you don't have to do with the entire capacity shutting down. And of course, if the threshold has been also been defined, and once it is below a particular threshold, that means your capacity is likely being over provisioned at that instance. Then you have that automation in place to actually scale down your capacity. Now, if you have some of these reporting, they fit into different models of your FinOps maturity, either the cross stage, the work stage, or the running stage. So for an organization that have their capacity metric app up and running, then they are at the crawling stage. Once you now start to have your automations in place, then you are at a very better place now. That's the next phase, which is the working phase, and eventually into to your running phase. So these are the tools that are available for you to actually easily implement FinOps with your Microsoft Fabric. I think that will be the end. I don't know if there are any questions. Then I can take that question. In the absence of any question, then I'll call on Marcel to take over from here.
Yes, I have a question. So I know where are Azure FinOps 2. So do you know what is the difference between the FinOps in Fabric and the Azure FinOps?
Yes. So the FinOps tool that you have natively in Fabric is just showing you the capacity consumption usage. It does not help you calculate the cost. So let me just go back in here. So on my screen right here, you see that we have just the capacity consumption right here. So you don't have the monetary value. So for you to have the monetary value, you have to calculate by the per seconds rate of your consumption. But the open source tool that we have available in the markets right now, where is that? I think it's right here. Yeah. So you are able to see the cost in monetary terms, not just the consumption rate. So for example, if you have just the capacity metric app, maybe you are at the crawl stage of your FinOps maturity, but when you've gone ahead to implement this open source tool and then you're able to see the cost, then you are at the next phase of your maturity model. Maybe we can fit that to be your working stage, or when you now start to have automation based on the reservation, based on the cost, then we can say that you are at the running phase of your maturity model.
Ah, really nice. So thank you. So, but we have no questions in the comments, or no, I see no one. So for that, I would say, yeah, thank you. It was really amazing. A really good insight about this topic. Our next speaker is Jedra Ongole with from Events to Insights, working with data and Fabric Event House. We start in nearly 50 minutes. I want to thank you, Francis. Was really amazing. Nice to meet you, and I hope to see you soon.
Yeah, thank you, Master. Peace out.
Bye-bye.